reality will always behave in a way that is in accordance to whatever we believe we are. And therefore, anything we try to explore of the world will be limited to that belief. So if we believe we're temporarily limited, localized inside the head, then we try to explore the nature of reality. The nature of reality will be limited to the belief we have about ourselves, because the nature of reality and our investigation will be limited to the tool with which we experience it. We therefore experience reality with the mind. There's no other reality. There's nothing else to experience it with, right? We have to look through the mind in order to experience a world. What science tries to do is to explore reality without knowing the tool with which they are exploring reality, namely the mind. We wouldn't expect to explore the stars with a faulty telescope. We wouldn't expect to explore the stars if we did not know the tool we were using to explore it. How would we ever have an accurate representation of what we're actually looking at? The lens could be out of focal point. It could be blurry. We could think the blurry object is the experience of the object. We could even be looking at something completely different. If we don't know, if there's a scratch on the lens, if there's some type of tint, some type of coloring of the lens, we're not going to ever know if we're actually seeing the thing we're looking at, if we do not know the tool with which we are using to explore the world. In the same way, we must know the mind that we are using to explore the world. Now, the best question that we can ask then, and from that point of view, is to understand, well, what is the nature of the mind? When we look in our experience, the mind is a collection of perceptions and thoughts. There's nothing else to our experience in order for the mind to be, other than thought and perception. All we experience of the mind is thought and perception. There's one more experience, though, that isn't included in the experience of thought and perception, but is inherent in it. It's awareness. It's the awareness of thought and perception. So what we find is that thought and perception are the experience of the mind, and we notice thought and perception are actually the experience of the world. There's no other experience of the world other than the perception of it. And added to it, a collection of thoughts that create the belief of what it is that we are perceiving. But other than that, we're not really perceiving anything other than perception. And it's thought then that creates the experience that that perception is seeming to perceive. It creates the perception, names it, gives it a form, you see, and then says this is a towel, this is a vase, this is a flower. That's thought and perception chopping up one infinite seamless reality like a knife and fork, and we're dishing it to ourselves and we're feeding it to ourselves. This isn't a bad thing, but that's just what's happening. What are we feeding it to? We're feeding it to awareness. Awareness is the experiencer of our experience. What else could be experiencing it? So awareness is experiencing ourselves. Now, when we're experiencing the world, what we tend to do is get lost in the content that we are experiencing. We get lost in thought and perception. Perception includes everything perceivable. Sensations, sights, smells, touches, tastes, even the feeling of anxiety, of hunger, they are sensations. Likewise, thought includes all of visualization and imagery. So when we're having this experience, we see that, well, all I'm having is an experience of thought, perception, and the awareness of it. Now the question is, could I be inside a thought and perception? Well, no, because I experience my thought and perceptions. I'm not necessarily inside a thought and a perception. So if I go to my experience and I say, well, I'm having an experience of a thought, I am obviously not the thought, because when the thought comes to an end, I don't disappear. Then I go to my experience of perceptions. When I turn my head, I don't disappear. When I close my eyes, I don't disappear. Everything we do not disappear, even though perceptions are continually coming and going. So what we need to see is that reality is a self-experience. All reality is an internal experience. There's no external experience of reality. Because even the sounds that you hear are made of perception. Think about it. When you're hearing a sound, all there is the experience of hearing. And the sound you experience is not in the object you hear, neither is it in your ear. Think about it. Where does the experience of sound take place? It obviously doesn't take place in the object, and obviously doesn't take place in your ear. Because your ear is also another thing that takes place where? Where does your ear take place? So what we see is that we're not really ever experiencing objects. We are only ever experiencing perceptions. Perceptions are what? They're our mind. The mind is hearing, seeing, touching, tasting. They are internal experience, just like thinking is an internal experience. So when we're having a sensory experience, we're not experiencing an external world, we're experiencing an internal world. Everything is an internal experience, just like thinking is an internal experience. The sight of the body, if you go to your experience, the only experience you have of the body is a pure sensation. Even the weight of your body. Weight is what? A degree of sensation that we call weight. Your body right now is a cloud-like amorphous sensation. It doesn't have any weight because if you take a sensation, how much would a sensation weigh? You see? The actual experience of it is not an experience of something. So your experience of the body is this formless sensation-like experience. And then when we perceive that visually, we're simply perceiving the visual representation of the center point of sensation, which is our mind. So we go to experience other people. All we're doing is seeing another. When we see other people, we're experiencing a mind's mental process in visual form. You see, the sensory process of another mind, when we see another human being, we're just witnessing the crystallized, formalized equivalent of their internal process of sensory perception. And everything we're experiencing doesn't happen externally. We're all having the same internal experience of the same reality from multiple points of view. Because awareness cannot itself be more than one, because awareness itself, in your direct experience right now, we're doing this very quickly, but your experience of awareness is what? It's unobjective. You cannot catch awareness. If you try to grab awareness, you're simply aware of the grabbing. If you try to touch awareness, you're simply aware of the touching. You can't touch, grab, or do anything to awareness because it stands outside time and space. Time and space are something that are only there relative to thought and objects. Time and space are only there relative to a thought or to an object. Without an object or without a thought, there is no experience of time and space. I've included this in another video. I'll leave the link at the end to that. So we're experiencing, when we look at our own body, our own internal system of mind process, of sense faculties in visual form. Likewise, when we see another, then the experience we're having of reality is not outside us, but inside us, and we are all inside consciousness. Every body, mind is inside consciousness. That means that your body that you're experiencing right now is not necessarily a body. You're actually experiencing your mind. So everything you experience is your mind, and your mind is a localization of consciousness. Now, the mind is not separate from consciousness. So if you think of an ocean of consciousness, in the ocean you can have currents that move inside the ocean. Well, your experience is like a current inside the ocean. It's not separate from the ocean, but it's a localized movement of the ocean. That's how we can see experience. So we don't have a body and a mind. We just have a mind and the awareness of it. And the mind itself is not really existent. We just have perception. The mind isn't this thing that's just constantly on. The mind is just a ripple of awareness, a ripple of existence, existence rippling. And when we experience the rippling, we call it a mind. The mind is the experience of the ripples of awareness. So when we experience the ripples of perception, the ripples of awareness, we say, oh, I'm having a human experience. No, the human experience is pure ripples of creation, pure instantaneous ripples of awareness. And we just experience it because we are aware from all points of view or at all times. So there's nowhere that we're not. So as one infinite consciousness that has no size, shape, form, or color, we're experiencing zero-dimensional awareness, rippling in the form of a localized experience, experiencing our own content. So this is why when we say non-duality is not two, it's because awareness is the only experience we're having, because the only thing there is to claim an experience of the world is the perception of it. And the only thing to claim the experience of a perception of the world is the awareness of it. It's the only thing there present. It's such a simple thing to see, right? We just look at what is the substance of the thing that it's made of. It's made of awareness, because without awareness, there's no perception. With no perception, there's no world. The world is limited to perception, because without perception, there is no world. And if there is no world, well, there's no world. So what we're seeing is that everything emanates from awareness. Life is the animated expression of awareness. In the same way that A wave is the animated expression of the ocean. The ocean in motion is a wave. Consciousness in motion is the mind. And because awareness is the only thing there is, and the minute that there is any fluctuation in itself, which it does create by itself, it experiences it. And that's what life is. We're experiencing the emanation of creation. And this is what this physical realm seems to be, where we experience all these colors and things like that. It's like the physical manifestation of what is internally unmanifest and in pristine awareness. So awareness can only be one. No, you can't even call it one. This is why they call it non-duality, not two. It's because to say that there's one implies that there could be more. So what we're saying is awareness is transcendent of the place where numbers and things take place. It's transcendent of having ones and twos and threes and fours. It goes beyond time and space. Only things in time and space have a relative existence where you can take them away and add them and contain them and put them in things. That's limited experience. Awareness is beyond that. So that means awareness is not finite. People think of infinite awareness as something that is massive and huge and is like this grand experience. It's actually the lack of experience. That's what makes it transcendent. It still exists, but it doesn't exist in experience because it's outside the dimension of relative 3D experience. So if something is outside of relative 3D experience and it still exists, it means that it's zero dimensional. Something zero dimensional has no limit, has no form, has no color. It cannot contain that, which means that there can only be one of them. Because how can you have two of those? Because if you had two, there'd have to be a border where one starts and one begins. But how can you have a border between something that doesn't have a size or shape? It doesn't make any sense. So when we say awareness is infinite, it's because it's borderless, infinite, pristine, and transcendent of the dimension where you can even have a border. So how many of those can you have? You can't have any more than one, if any, right? Ultimately, you can't have any because any implies could be something. This is transcendent of anything that it could possibly be. That's why everything is contained within it, because it is itself pure, infinite emptiness. We then experience the fullness of it from the relative point of view, but it itself is purely empty. It's so empty that it can contain everything. So this awareness is inherently infinite. That's what we are. There could not be more than one thing in creation. What would that thing be that is other than the one thing of existence? It would render existence non-existent, because existence has to be infinite if existence exists. Because how could it be anything other than infinite? You see? You can't have a relative existence. Existence partially either ultimately exists or it doesn't exist. And the fact there is existence tells us with absolute certainty that it is infinite, real, true from all points of view. No one can deny existence. Existence is. And that is what we are. I have a free community. The link is in the description if you'd like to join. I do meditations and guidance on this every single week. I'd love to see you there if you're interested. Have an amazing day, guys. Take care. Bye.